Blog Talk Radio.
When you're born in this world, you're given a ticket to the freak show.
It's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And when you're born in America, you're given a front row seat.
So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents.
Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
You have no choice. You have owners. They own you.
There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Do you know how naive you sound?
Why?
Senators and presidents don't have men killed.
Oh. Who's being naive, Kay?
They got you by the balls.
Hello, Front Rovia. Welcome to another edition of Front Row at the Freak Show. I am Adamizer, sitting in the host seat tonight, a little bit unusual, but our friend Crafty has other obligations he needs to be tending to just for this evening. So it's 4:20, and I will be taking the reins. Now, I'm coming at you from, as Crafty likes to say, FEMA Region 1 up here in the Northeast. And tonight, our topic is going to be propaganda, or as the show title indicates, propaganda fuck. We're going to be talking about all sorts of great topics tonight, looking into all sorts of different angles on propaganda. And I know, just want to get this out of the way, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, didn't you just do mainstream media last week? What's the difference? And I don't know if I have a great answer for that question, other than the fact that I'll be focusing on informing you all about propaganda itself and some of the facts that go along with that. Of course, we'll be doing our Scuttlebutt News and taking callers in the second hour, as always. But for tonight, we're going to focus on, as I say, propaganda, and which, loosely defined, again, there's a lot of definitions out there. It's using the media and other sources to influence public opinion to further an agenda. I should also point out, not all propaganda is a bad thing. There are a lot of folks who believe it's a very necessary part of society, that we that there are ways to encourage people to do good things, whether it's just doing a good turn for people, or whether it's brushing your teeth, or whatever it may be. That can all be serviced through propaganda. But obviously what we're going to be focusing on tonight is more of the dark side of propaganda. So I hope you all get your ears on out there. Speaking of which, we have a guest co-host who will be taking my usual seat tonight. I'm going to go ahead and turn on his mic as we speak and make sure he's out there. Hey, Bax, you out there?
Yeah, I'm here, Adamizer. How's it going?
Oh, not bad, not bad. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself? Let them know what brought you here tonight.
Well, I started listening to the show several months ago, and I'm, in my mid-30s, married, kids, full-time student. I work as well. And I really enjoyed a lot of the things that you guys talk about, and, wanted to be a part of the show because I think it's important that, we address things that are maybe not covered by the mainstream media, or that are not fully covered, I guess we could say.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about propaganda, is the use of half-truths or deliberate omissions to try to influence public opinion.
Absolutely. So, and, you bring up a good point when you say that, not all propaganda is necessarily bad. You look at things, commercials aimed at mothers to not drink alcohol. while they're pregnant. They show a lot of powerful imagery, that go along with those ads, and those are good. People shouldn't drink while they're pregnant.
Yep, absolutely. And again, there are plenty of historical cases of positive use of propaganda. It's a very powerful tool. The problem is, more often, as with most powerful tools, we find it in the wrong hands rather than the right ones. And nowadays, it's very hard to I just talked about, it's very hard to distinguish between mainstream media and propaganda, mainly because mainstream media has become mostly propaganda. And the same is true of advertising. It's very hard to have an advertiser telling you the facts, because the facts don't drive up their profits. What drives up their profits is getting you to believe that, Axe body spray will make you irresistible to women and things like that.
Right.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you know, or take your best guess if you don't, where the word, not necessarily where the word propaganda comes from, but who the first people to use propaganda were?
I believe it was a Latin term.
Yes.
Maybe used by the Romans. Is that correct?
Well, not directly. But the tie-ins, yes, are certainly obvious there. And it's funny because most people will say that communists invented propaganda. That is total bullshit. The simple fact is that the first use of the term was from the Catholic Church. There was an administrative body for the Catholic Church created in 1622 that was called the Congregation for Propagating the Faith, and it was shortened to propaganda. It was obviously its goal was to get more people in the seats for the sermons and whatnot, for Mass, but yeah, they were the first ones to actually use that term, was the Catholic Church. And religious propaganda, of course, is one of the main forms of propaganda, one of the most notable forms of propaganda. Obviously, if you talk to me, I would say that the entire Bible itself is propaganda. But yeah, I mean, aside from politics, aside from economics, aside from advertising, the church has done quite a good job in convincing people through things like fear of hell that they have the answers that you need to have and that you need to be there feeding their collection plates. And yeah, it's again, one of the more common types of propaganda that you'll see is coming out of the churches even today.
And I'd say you'd be hard-pressed to find any better imagery than from any of the major religious groups with their depictions of hell and of heaven, for that matter.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one of the things, and this was something I forget where I saw it, but it was a very good explanation of propaganda. Not necessarily its definition, I already talked about that, but in the how it works category. And I think this is if there's one thing that people take away from today's show, I think it's understanding how propaganda works, because we all want to believe that we're immune to propaganda, that we couldn't possibly be suckered in by propaganda. But when you understand how it works, you've got to understand that virtually nobody is immune to propaganda. What our brains, are designed to process two very different types of information. One of those types of information is logic, facts, mathematics, things like that. To use reason, things like that. And that would be the outer portion of our brains for the most part, especially the frontal lobe. The inner portion of our brains, they call it the primal brain or the instinctual brain. That's where our emotions come from. Okay, so a really good propagandist, all he's doing is finding ways to bypass those filters you've got in the outer portion of your brain and start picking away at that emotional, primitive inner brain of yours, so that your emotions take over, because we all know when we get emotional, we're not very reasonable. We're not really thinking logically. We've all experienced it. So that's really the trick. That's the only trick to it, is if you can use especially certain keywords and phrases to bypass the logical defenses of the brain, then bang, you can control people. You can get them to do and say all sorts of things. Take the American Tea Party as an excellent example. You're always hearing these emotion words: liberty, freedom, or on the other end of the spectrum, communism. Okay, these words that invoke strong emotions in most people, and once those emotional centers of the brain start firing, it's virtually impossible for these people to look at anything objectively anymore and to realize that they're being lied to, or if not lied to, being told half the truth by somebody who's got an agenda to push. So understanding this concept of how our brains work and how propaganda takes advantage of that is really the best key you can have to trying to unlock truth and to trying to, again, not necessarily be immune, but at least be aware of when somebody's trying to influence you through media, advertising, or what have you.
I agree, and I think to further your point, a lot of people don't realize that there are millions and millions of dollars spent creating propaganda and figuring out what it is that will best affect people and trigger those emotional responses. There are schools based on the psychology of propaganda and how it's called marketing, and as we'll get into later, Mr. Bernays and the psychological aspect of public relations and marketing.
Yep. Actually, I've got quite a bit on Bernays to go over later in the show. And for those of you who haven't heard of Edward Bernays, again, pull up a chair because you're going to get some interesting information about people who are masters of making you think what they want you to think. So how's your week been, brother? How you been?
Oh, it's going well. Work and school, sleep, eat, study, repeat, all that.
I hear that. And I need to apologize to the listeners tonight if my voice is a little off or if I don't have quite the energy I might otherwise have. I seem to be coming down with a cold that I woke up with today. So, again, that may throw just a little bit of a wrench in the works. But I'm here.
Since we're making apologies, we'll go ahead and say that, this is my first shot at this. So
that's right. That's right. Exactly. This is a whole new dynamic here. So we'll see how this works out. Now, so moving on, we want to get to our scuttlebutt in just a minute and talk about some of the news events that have been happening throughout the week that may have slipped through the cracks of the mainstream and that nonetheless people should be well aware of. But before we do that, let me see if I can't pull up one of these lovely station identification type things that our good friend Crafty has put together. Let's see. Where's the short one? Obviously my first time at the control board, so bear with me for just a moment here.
No worries.
There we go. All right. So we will be back in 32 seconds, and here you are.
Conspiracy, maybe. Screwed, definitely.
Hey, you're listening to The Front Row at the Freak Show on blogtalkradio.com. For all things Freak Show, please visit us at frontrowatthefreakshow.com. Find us on Twitter, @Adamizer1 and @TheFreakShow. And, of course, Front Row at the Freak Show on YouTube and Facebook. All right, you freaks be good now, you hear?
At the foothills of forever I trip, fall into frustration again.
All righty. Now, obviously, our promos aren't set up to include your information, Bax, but if you wanted to let people know where to find you on Twitter or whatever else, feel free to do so. If you don't, I completely understand. It's that kind of world. If you have any interest in that, now would be a good time.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'll stay on the sidelines for right now.
I understand. I understand completely. It is a post-9/11 world.
Absolutely. But if you do want to get a hold of me, you could always feel free to call into the show.
Right, exactly. Yes, we will be taking your calls in the second hour. We hope to have plenty of people lighting up the phone lines. I've heard at least one or two people threaten to call in and give us an earful about their opinions on what is and isn't propaganda.
Great.
One who seems to be a big fan of Bill O'Reilly, who will be coming up at Scuttlebutt on my end, I'll tell you that. But so we may get some very interesting calls tonight. Now,
excellent. Good to hear.
We might as well go ahead and jump right into the scuttlebutt and update people on the news. Now, hold on. I didn't. Did you just have that one big story you wanted to do, or did you have multiple stories you wanted to share with everybody?
I've got a couple I picked out that I think are relevant, but...
All right, that sounds excellent. All right, do you want to start off, or would you rather that I do?
Go ahead and take it, man.
All right. And once again, kind of winging things a little bit tonight, since I'm not used to being in the driver's seat, so bear with me. But I'll go ahead and give you our first story. This comes to you from thecrux.com, THECRUX.com, and the headline is, "Shopping with cash is now illegal in this state." Okay? I kid you not, Louisiana has banned the use of cash in all transactions involving secondhand goods. So this includes yard sales, auctions, anything like that.
How's that supposed to work?
Yeah, well, the excuse is that it's supposed to make sure that police departments have something to go on in the case of stolen property cases. But it's honestly not all that surprising to me that states are starting to do this. Cash is anonymous. And basically, they don't want you doing anything anonymously. It's much better if you go ahead and use your credit card or your checks or whatever else, so that all goes back to that lovely prison database over at the NSA, and they make sure they know what you're buying, why you're buying it. So if you happen to go pick up a copy of the Communist Manifesto and you go out and speak against the government or against capitalism or whatever else, then they can go ahead and try and ruin you with that type of information.
Wouldn't that be a sight, writing checks at a yard sale?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how they expect to enforce this, but again, I think this is what we're seeing here is the tip of a very big iceberg in terms of the way things will go. Those of you who've who've watched a lot of stuff on 9/11, you've probably seen that interview, and I'm sorry the man's name escapes me, but he talks about I think it was in the Zeitgeist films. He talks about how he was a friend of the Rockefellers. And, they was talking with one of them before 9/11. He says, you just wait and see. Something big is going to happen real soon, and we'll be able to go ahead and invade Iraq and invade Afghanistan and invade, basically all the places that we've gone ahead and invaded. And he asked him, he said, well, what is the point of this? Where does this all end? And the gentleman from the Rockefeller family says, well, it ends when we have a chip in everybody's arm that has all your money on it. And basically, if you get out of line, we just shut that chip off. And so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that we're seeing bans on cash transactions. Again, tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to be going down that road more and more as we step into the future.
Absolutely, and that is a quoted statement from one of the Rockefellers. That's not just secondhand storytelling.
Right, absolutely. All right, so that was my first story. Have you got one for us?
Sure. I haven't seen this anywhere in the mainstream media other than the internet, but apparently the Justice Department, and this is coming from MSNnews.com, the Justice Department, FBI, have formally acknowledged that nearly every examiner in an elite FBI forensic unit gave flawed testimony in almost all trials in which they offered evidence against criminal defendants over more than a 2-decade period before 2000. What this deals with is hair analysis, and it's, as of now, 26 overstated forensic matches in ways that favored prosecutors in more than 95% of the 268 trials reviewed so far, which are arresting the government with the county's largest post-conviction review of questioned forensic evidence, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, Basically, the cases include 32 defendants sentenced to death. Of those, 14 have been executed or died in prison. This is, to use your statement, the tip of a very large iceberg. to say that the FBI, one of the highest law enforcement groups in the land, so to speak, have committed egregious errors in DNA evidence. I mean, this is supposed to be the deciding factor in someone's case. I mean, beyond a reasonable doubt, your DNA was there. We have the match. And now they're going back and saying that, hundreds of cases could be totally fabricated, if not, over-embellished. I mean, this is outrageous. Yep.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think, in this day and age, it's pretty much accepted amongst anybody that DNA is the nail in the coffin in most cases. And, yeah, if we can't trust the information that's coming to us with regards to DNA testing, then, again, I agree that it's probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of wrongly convicted people. Even in the cases where maybe people did do it, or certainly in the cases where they didn't, the whole case tends to hinge on DNA evidence these days, and that is pretty amazing. I actually didn't catch that story. I'm just finding out about it now, and wow, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's appalling, just to say the least. And like I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. They're still reviewing, hundreds of cases. It's not to say that there wasn't evidence that proved these people were guilty, but they are finding. I mean, even people that have been sentenced to death, maybe were not guilty. Right. Right. Yeah, that is absolutely incredible, and that's one of the reasons that I'm at least on the fence when it comes to the idea of the death penalty. Is that's a bell you can't unring. Once that mistake is made, whether it's on bad DNA evidence or false testimony or any number of other things, once that person's dead, you're not going to be able to revive them and say sorry anymore. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it really is a shame, and it also opens the door too to start to wonder. I mean, not just the death penalty, what I have a lot of questions about, but the general penitentiary system in general. This was invented in the 1800s, and we're pretty much doing things not all that different than we did back then. It might be a wiser idea to try to re-educate people who are committing legitimate crimes. I mean, we know that obviously there's plenty of people being thrown into jail for minor drug offenses and other things that should not be legitimate crimes. But even for those being thrown in on legitimate crimes, shouldn't we be trying to find a way to help these people not commit crimes in the future, to understand why their actions were wrong, to give them alternatives, rather than just locking them up for a few years and turning them into more dangerous criminals because they just spent a few years with criminals. It's kind of a stupid way to handle the justice system, if you ask me. Oh, I agree. And, I mean, it depends on how you look at the prison system. I mean, some people look at it as a cash crop, pun intended, unfortunately. But mental disorders and mental health is a huge, huge issue in our country. And, I mean, from addiction to, I can't remember the number, but I've worked with developmentally disabled adults for the better part of my adult life, and statistically there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, especially homeless, who are out there undiagnosed, and typically people just, there's more trash on the street, there's another bum, but you don't know anything about these people. And I think, the mental health system needs to be revamped, overhauled, fixed, whatever it is, because, not all people can be reformed into a contributing member of society, but, once someone is institutionalized, it's over. They can't come back out. Yep, very true. It's awful. Very true. And, it's worth noting that, if I remember correctly last time I read it, it was USA has less than 6% of the world's population, but over 25% of the world's prisoners. And you talked about the cash cow that prisons are starting to become nowadays. It's interesting. I was talking with a guy, and I've mentioned the Free State Project a couple of times. This is a group of mostly libertarian folks coming to New Hampshire to basically try and take over the state and shut down the government. I say that also noting that some of them are friends of mine. I don't necessarily agree with the way they're with their goals or what they're trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I have friends and neighbors who are part of this group. And I was talking to one of them the other day after I'd gotten an email from, I follow New Hampshire Labor News, and they had sent out something about the Koch brothers being directly tied to providing funding and other resources to the Free State Project. And I kind of, reacted to that by sending an email out to the friends I have that are associated with the Free State Project. I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Don't you know that if you're on the same side as these kinds of people, that you have, you're in the wrong. You got to know, if nothing else, that you're being fooled here. You're a victim of propaganda is what's happening. And one of them actually sent back to me this article where the Koch brothers were working with leftists on prison reform. And, it's interesting because, of course there are always going to be these issues of overlap. But if you really dig down into the article, what you find is that the reason the Koch brothers are getting involved with this is that they don't want to pay taxes to fund prisons, and they'd much rather see it reformed into a private industry where they can make money on it. And, that is not the direction that we need to go on. We need to get into a position where we help those who can be helped. And, I think that just continuing to lock up people, especially on, again, minor drug offenses and things like that, ruining their lives is terrible. I was, just to share a personal story, when I was 16 years old, I was caught with a small amount of marijuana. And I was brought before a judge, and the judge said, if I had been an adult, I would have gotten a fine, I would have gone home. In some of the worst states, I might have actually gone to jail for a little bit, but at least it would have been over after that. Instead, as somebody who was under 18, as a minor, they put all of these court restrictions on me that said, you can't skip classes, you can't get detentions for any reason. If you do, it's contempt of court. So next thing you know, I've got a dozen different contempt of court charges, and I actually ended up going to juvenile hall and spent 6 months in juvenile hall here in New Hampshire for nothing more than 2 counts of misdemeanor possession of marijuana, coupled with, a dozen or 2 counts of contempt of court, which was just me, again, skipping a class or getting a detention or whatever it was. 6 months, I get sent there. I mean, robbed me of my entire childhood. I got put in there with murderers and with rapists and some of the some of the most messed up kids in the entire state, all because I smoked a little pot, all because I guess the anti-pot propaganda wasn't working on me at that age. I had no reason to believe that I was going to suffer in any reasonable way unless somebody decided to throw me in jail for it and take away my childhood. And I ended up dropping out of school as a result. My family life was certainly shaken up. My poor mother had to go through it. And all of this, over something as stupid as just smoking a little pot to take the edge off, So it's a pretty wild world out there.
Yeah, and that's, we all make mistakes, especially at a young age. I mean, we all do things that and that's one of the problems with the internet and things like YouTube. All these mistakes are now made public, but, a child who needs a helping hand, and yeah, maybe you deserve some type of punishment, but to take away a child's life, I mean, there's a real problem, and it's only getting worse, and when you talk about the private companies, it's in the United Kingdom and Australia right now. I cannot remember the name of this company, and I apologize for that. But there is a private company who is taking over prison systems, and they're basically the states are giving up these prisons, and they're, running them like a business pretty much. And I cannot remember the name of this company, and I wish I could because, it's just me talking unless I can tell you the name of the company, but it is happening.
I understand. Yeah, it really is, and it's again, we're going in the absolute wrong direction on that sort of thing. Now I'm a little curious here because I just glanced at the board and we actually have a caller, but I recognize the number. I know exactly who it is. That would be our usual host. I'm not sure if he's looking to jump in to say a few words at this point, or if he's just out there listening. But why don't I let him in for a second? We'll see what he has to say.
Absolutely.
Hey, Crafty, you there?
I am here, fellas.
Hey, brother, how are you?
I am doing all right. Of course, I chewed up most of my available talk time with you guys keeping me on hold, but you bastards. I tried to catch you.
Hey, you're supposed to call in the second hour. You should know that.
I tried to call in right before Scuttlebutt, but you're running such an efficient machine there, Adamizer. I was like, so what's Scuttlebutt already? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, once I want to be on time. I'll see if I can pull that off.
And I said, we cannot have Scuttlebutt going off smoothly, so I'm going to call right the hell now. But no, actually, what the reason why I can't do the show tonight, I actually got to get to in a few minutes, so probably be able to tune back in after the, maybe for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but I did just want to pop in and, couldn't resist throwing my .02 into the tonight's show. As I think I said, missing the show on 420, and a topic like propaganda is just killing me over here. So,
we need
not only is it 420, but it's also George Takei's birthday today. So happy birthday, George!
Oh man, I just had no idea, and I almost let. Yeah, and speaking of dates and propaganda, last night I think it was about 11:30, and I sent out a tweet and a Facebook post because I had almost let the anniversary of the OKC bombing go without any mention, and right, but I mean, what a massive, obviously historical event in this country, and if you listen to any of the the mainstream media or anything like that, no remembrances, no nothing, or barely a whimper, and so obviously they don't want you looking at the facts of the OKC bombing, which are quite possibly, when you stack it all up, say, versus 9/11, it could even be more egregious to pointing that it was, indeed a false flag operation. But
it's funny you bring that up because my final story for Scuttlebutt actually involves Alex Jones's commentary on on the Oklahoma City bombing, the stuff that he came out with, I believe, today. And
oh wow!
Yeah, I was going to kind of use that as the jumping off point to beat on him a little bit.
Oh, okay, wow. Because I was going to say, geez, are we flip flopping here? You're going into the Alex Jones corner as I'm coming out of it, or
no.
It's funny. I'll obviously, if I don't catch it live, I will certainly listen to what you have to say about it tomorrow or something. And because at least as far as I know, Alex has always been a pusher of it being a false flag and all that. So be interested to hear what you have to say about it. But as far as, and I got to pretty much run, fellas, unfortunately, but just so you know, Adamizer, what you were quoting there about the RFID chips is actually, they might have played a snippet of it in Zeitgeist, but it was actually Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism documentary, which is a fantastic documentary. Highly recommend for anyone. And of course, Aaron Russo, great director. Brought us Trading Places, among other things. But that is a great documentary that he did, and it bellied up to, I believe it was Nicholas Rockefeller. Did you say that? I think one of the Rockefellers.
No,
anyway.
I didn't. I just said one of the Rockefellers. I didn't remember specifically. It had been a while since.
I think it was. It was Nicholas. I think Rockefeller, but.
I believe you're correct. Yep.
So I guess if, there was one thing that I kind of wanted to throw my 2 cents in, and I had emailed you, I think I tweeted it, actually. I tweeted it out. Just a great video that I stumbled upon, and ultimately, a guy with a lot of truth and a few very good videos on YouTube, and it's his name is Professor Jerry Croft. So you can YouTube him, and the video that I saw was called Propaganda and Manipulation: How Mainstream Media Engineers and Distorts Our Perceptions. He really does a fantastic job breaking it down. I think what you touched on with the the neurological aspects of it and all that, and also I thought it was great when you mentioned about propaganda can be used for good, right? And he actually went into it, spent a lot of time on this too, actually talking about like the Cosby Show in the 80s. Okay, and Cosby's intent, very, very deliberate intent to put a successful, black family, where the kids study, stay out of drugs, go to college, doctor, husband, lawyer, wife, clean humor, all that sort of thing, and the impact that it had on the African American community, and they can really look at that time period that it was running and say a few years after, and in the African American community, test scores were up, college applications and college acceptance was up, all sorts of things.
All I can think of is how much of that might have been undone by the fact that he now has 40 women accusing him of rape.
Right. I know. But to the point of what he really does, though, in the thing, and is great. And I'm going to leave it at this. But he turns that into the hip hop movement, and he basically says, he goes, let's read some literature from the mid 1800s, and he so he goes and reads some literature about the stereotypical view of African Americans, overly aggressive, especially sexual and savage, animalistic, social menaces, sociopathic. This is kind of the thing that was being put in books and articles all over the place through the 1800s, and so then he fast forwards to the hip hop movement, and when it started and it was underground, it was much more political and none of the stuff that you see today. But all of a sudden you saw that shift, right, where you're getting the Snoop Dogg's and the Puff Daddies and the Jay-Z's and all these guys coming in, and the lyrics, take a noticeable shift to the gangster world.
Yeah.
And and in direct contrast to, say, the Cosby Show, the effect that it's had. And what is really, I think, the great point that he drives home is that when you look at these guys, the Snoop Dogg's, the Jay-Z's, and all these guys, he's like, they might be well paid and doing that, but everything they're singing, everything the way they're dressing, the image, everything is purely done by the white guys who own the record labels.
Right.
They're calling all the shots, right? They're the ones deciding what lyrics and what songs to go on the albums. They're the ones saying what they need to be wearing and, you know, the bitches that need to be around and everything else, you know.
Yeah,
so,
that's the whole you're not being black enough mentality.
Yes.
And it's, you know, it's like anything else. Once you get capitalism involved, it turns out to be all about profit, and everything gets ruined.
Yeah, go figure, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Professor Jerry Croft, he's got a website, collectivepsych.com. And again, you can YouTube him. But really good stuff. I mean, I went on. He's got a video. He breaks down JFK superbly. He's got some books out there. I'm definitely going to look into some of his books. And, you know, just the way he presents it, too, in a very, you know, almost like a classroom environment, slides and very organized fashion. And, you know, so highly recommend them. It's if you want to learn more about the science and everything else of propaganda, here's certainly one avenue for the freaks out there to explore. So, and that's about all I got tonight, fellas.
Excellent. Well, it's great to hear from you, and have fun with what you're doing tonight, and I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to you getting back next week.
And Bax, right?
Yeah.
Bax, did you say I Adamizer, I think you said Baxter. Did you say Baxter? Is it
no, I thought I said Bax.
Brax,
maybe
right?
not. It's possible.
Brax?
I thought he said Bax, but I mean, I may not have been listening, so.
I might not have either, but Bax. It's Bax, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Doing fantastic, Bax. So,
I
you
don't
boys
believe
have
that,
fun.
But I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, no, you should believe it. Absolutely. This show's going like a well-oiled machine. You kidding me? No, you boys have fun the rest of the way, and like I said, I won't be calling in the second half, but I might definitely be tuning in and listening to the last half hour or so, and if I can, and we'll certainly see you in all the places that we see each other during the week after this. So you boys enjoy, and we will talk to you later.
All right, man. Have a great night.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Later.
You too, fellas. Bye.
Later. All right. So that stretched out our scuttlebutt just a little bit here, which we're still in the middle of, but it was great to hear from Crafty, as always. I'm going to go ahead and toss up another promo before we get back into the scuttlebutt, and I think I'll, just in case he's hanging on for a couple more minutes, I'm going to go ahead and jump into that Alex Jones story right after this.
What up, freaks? Hey, you're listening to Front Row at the Freak Show. Check us out at frontrowatthefreakshow.com, at Adamizer1, at The Freak Show, and of course, Front Row at the Freak Show on YouTube and Facebook. Peace!
At the foothills of forever I trip, fall into frustration again.
And we're back. Hopping back into the scuttlebutt and bringing you folks back up on the news. I'm going to go ahead and jump in with my next story here. This comes to us from rightwingwatch.org. Right Wing Watch. No, not a wristwatch. We're keeping an eye on these folks. And the heading in this story is Alex Jones, Oklahoma City bombing, a false flag designed to embarrass conservatives. See, here's the thing. As I've expressed before, I'm not a huge fan of Alex Jones. I think he is much more profit-driven than truth-driven, and I think that he's a little too full of himself. I don't care for the fact that he's a Christian. I don't care for the fact that he's a capitalist conservative. And I think this is a good example. Now, those of us who have investigated the events of the Oklahoma City bombing, yeah, there's some shit going on there. Okay, it certainly isn't as cut and dry as as the official stories would lead you to believe. There's plenty of things that can be pointed to say, hey, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. We all know that. Okay, it's almost its own little mini version of 9/11. But to start throwing around his favorite slogan, false flag, which thereby puts it directly on the government, and to then also assign motive that it was to embarrass conservatives, is fucking ridiculous. He's got nothing to base any of that on. Okay, is there a government cover-up involved? Sure. But the fact that there was a government cover-up does not mean that the government did this, does not mean that they are responsible for it, okay? And it certainly doesn't bring you to the point where you can just pull a motive out of thin air and say this is why they did it. I mean, he is so much more conspiracy theory than conspiracy fact, and that is the number one reason I really don't tune into Alex Jones. Your thoughts, Bax?
Yeah, I mean, I read his stuff on InfoWars and some other sites, and it all seems a little too sensational with him oftentimes.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't like the term conspiracy theorist, but for him, I kind of think it fits because it seems like he's just one of those throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. Exactly.
And I think he loves to play the victim, and this is why, and this is the only reason that he came up with this whole idea that the Oklahoma City thing had to be to paint all conservatives as terrorists. It's because he's a conservative and he wants to play the victim. He loves to play the victim. It's no different than when he got on, what was it, the Piers Morgan show, and had that just friggin' mental breakdown, as far as I'm concerned, where he just, I don't know if he had too much coffee that day or what, but flipping out on Piers Morgan about the gun laws or the attempts to bring in any type of sensible gun control, which he then followed up with a petition to try to get Piers Morgan deported for, again, suggesting that we have some kind of reasonable gun control. Now, I own guns. I'm not going to live in a world where people who might victimize me have guns and I don't. But at the same time, I think that we shouldn't be letting just anybody have a friggin' gun. I think that's crazy. And, when you have the, lobby groups like the NRA who do not represent gun owners, but rather represent the gun manufacturers, okay, and use propaganda, again, here it comes, propaganda to convince every gun owner that, there's a threat of the government taking their guns away, when all people are talking about is reasonable restrictions against things like people who have, violent mental illness histories and things like that. That's fucking crazy. That's fucking crazy,
I agree. I agree 100%.
Nothing wrong with sensible control over the most, the most easily accessible death machines that we have.
Yeah, it's. They recently tried to pass I believe it was an amendment in West Virginia saying that you could conceal carry without a permit, and I think things like that are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we go through the permit process for a reason. I'm trained to handle a weapon. I am licensed. I mean, granted, I don't want the government to know about every single gun I own and when I use it, but, there is something to be said for someone going through the proper channels and receiving the proper training before they can just go around and carry a gun in their pocket or, hidden away around the public. People are not safe. And, I mean, we just talked about mental health issues in our country. And, to say that everyone should be out there carrying a gun, I think is a little far-fetched.
Absolutely, and I think you touched on a very important word there, which is training. I have gone through pretty extensive training with all sorts of different types of guns to make sure that I'm safe and those around me are safe. And meanwhile, you're seeing things like I think it was a town in Texas, surprise, surprise, that is literally encouraging its public school teachers to carry concealed weapons. And I'm sorry, but the most dangerous thing you can add to a situation where somebody has where a criminal has a gun, where somebody's taking hostages, where somebody's, even killing people or whatever else, is to have another person in there with a gun who isn't trained. There are reasons that guns should not be freely available to anybody who wants one. There's reasons, that they have waiting periods, or, we call them waiting periods. That's what the NRA wants us to call them. They're called cool-down periods, so that when you're pissed off, you can't just walk into a store and buy a gun, How is that, what is the harm in not being able to get a gun until next week,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, despite being inconvenienced because you wanted to go shoot an AR-15 this weekend, I don't know why you would need a gun immediately.
Right. Exactly. I mean, there is no good reason not to have sensible gun control. And again, you can argue all day long as to what's sensible, but I just can't see somebody coming up with a good excuse to avoid waiting periods on handguns and things like that. It's just, the only excuse is that you want people to sell more guns, and that's what the NRA is interested in. I actually was a member of the NRA and had to write to them to ask them to cancel my membership and make sure that they don't include me on any of their, on any of their numbers when they submit things to say, hey, well, we've got, however many million members that support this particular thing or support that thing. I said, take me off of that. I don't want anything to do with that. You do not represent gun owners. You represent gun manufacturers, and I'm not interested in your, in your capitalist games. That's
absolutely, and that's when I first started. I guess you can call me a gun enthusiast. I don't know, but when I first started purchasing guns and got my training, and I do have a concealed carry permit, but I researched the NRA because I thought, like you had said, this is a good group to join. They believe in gun ownership and guns' rights. They support the Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah. And as I started to research them, I realized that they're nothing more than lobbyists.
Exactly.
It is what it is. They represent the corporate interests of gun manufacturers. And, yes, they have done some good things for gun ownership, and they do support Americans, being able to own guns and have guns and not being taken away. But, there is a very dark side to all of that, at least I believe from my research.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. All right, you're up. You got another story for us?
Yeah, let's see here. We'll do... I wanted to draw attention to the Joseph County Oath Keepers, and there's some other local militias in the area. This is in an area of Oregon, and a lot of people are equating this to the second Bundy standoff. I don't know if any of the listeners or you remember the whole Clyde Bundy fiasco that happened over the grazing rights.
Yep.
Okay, well, this is actually a lot different, and for reasons I won't get into now, this is actually a very serious issue, not to undermine the other one, but this one, it also deals with the Bureau of Land Management. And the Gallus Mining District that's near Grants Pass, Oregon, they've been arguing with the federal government over mineral rights in Gallus Creek, and they've been operating a mining operation since the early 1870s. And what's happened is the Bureau of Land Management has come in and said that they do not have mineral rights. They've tried to disband the mining operations. They've threatened to fill in their mines, destroy any equipment that's not removed. They've sent cease and desist orders. And the problem is, you're talking about people who have been mining this area for, 150 years or so, and this has ramifications.
Just so I have it clear, it's not a bunch of redneck dumbasses riding around on four-wheelers on sacred Indian lands?
Yes, that not at all. The Bureau of Land Management has claimed that the mine itself has no rights to exist in that area, and so the miner's structures and equipment have to be removed. The Bureau of Land Management has also claimed that it has the authority to order the mining operations to be halted, and like I said, the tunnels to be filled so that they can't access. Geologists have said that only 10% of the gold in that area has been recovered since the mines have been opened. And they've recovered over 10 million ounces since they started mining there. This has large ramifications because if the Bureau of Land Management is allowed to come in and basically usurp mineral rights to people who have ownership of the land, then what's to say if you're growing something in your backyard, the Bureau of Land Management comes in and say, well, you're absorbing minerals in the ground. Or what if you find gold or oil? I mean, the likelihood of you becoming the next Beverly Hillbilly is probably pretty small. However, if you were to find something valuable within your land, who's to stop them from coming and taking it?
Right, absolutely. And, it's interesting because, again, I've mentioned, while I'm not exactly a libertarian, I would say as far as this federal government is concerned and my state government is concerned, I might as well be a libertarian. But I disagree very heavily. Most libertarians nowadays are anarcho-capitalists, and we all know I'm not a capitalist. But, they make good points sometimes, and I got to say, I was talking with one who was pointing out the fact that, for all intents and purposes, you don't really, you can buy your land, but you don't really own it. You're renting it from the federal government. And, and that's exactly what this sounds like, is that the federal government is coming in and playing landlord, saying, hey, yeah, sure, it's your land, but, you got to follow our rules on it. We don't want you doing that. And, while there are certainly cases that, where that needs to be done, I think it's a lot of power to be giving to an authority that has proven itself so corrupt these days. And I think we need to really step back and re-examine our entire system of government and how much we've let it become corrupted and why we've let it become corrupted. And I think that, as I always say, ties us back into economics and the idea that, is anybody really surprised in a system where, that's so market-centric that the government itself is for sale on the market on K Street to whatever lobbyist or whatever campaign donor wants to pay enough to get the right, to get the right privileges, the right tax laws, the right, relaxations of laws for the public good to help their profit line. I don't find that surprising at all. I think that's the world that we have created for ourselves by refusing to step back and accept that an economic system of winners and losers is eventually going to become a few winners and everybody else fucking loses.
Yeah, and I mean that all comes back to the whole 535 people are representative of the entire United States. I mean, that's like saying all of your teachers at your high school are direct representatives of the student body and all of the people living in that community. It's ludicrous. Exactly.
And we talked about that on the mainstream media, the amount of, it's 200 and some odd people controlling the information diets, the network executives controlling the information diets of well over 200 million people. And, this imbalance that we find everywhere is not healthy for anybody, and it's not it's not doing us any good. It's just driving us further and further down into the pit.
I agree.
Anyway, excellent story. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll go ahead and hop on my next story now. And I love to bring you news about what the religious nuts are pulling on people who dare to try to inject a little sanity into their lives. Well, this story comes from alternet.org, ALTERNET.org. Headline is, Atheists Condemn School Nurse for Refusing to Treat Student Who Won't Stand for Pledge of Allegiance. And I shit you not, this is the quote from the school nurse to some little girl who who refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance. He says, who would come into the school nurse for help. Fine, then leave. I have a right not to service you.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah. This is where this whole religious freedom laws are starting to take us. I mean, we all know, if you've been following it, that even hospitals now and doctors are trying to take advantage of this and not serve gay people at their hospital or their practice. Now you have school nurses in public schools doing the same, trying to say that, hey, if you're not going to say the Pledge of Allegiance, then I'm not going to give you service as the school nurse. Now, my understanding from having read the story is that, the girl didn't even get into what her, when she was asked why she didn't stand for the pledge, all she said was that she has a right not to participate. And it's interesting because when I was in school, which, wasn't very long, as I said, ended up going to juvie hall, dropping out of school and whatnot. But when I was in school, I didn't want to say the pledge. And it had nothing to do with the under God statement, though, obviously I have issues with that. It had everything to do with the idea that I didn't believe, I couldn't reconcile the idea that I lived in a free country, yet I would be compelled to pledge my allegiance to that country, that I would be forced to pledge my allegiance. At the time, not knowing any better, I would often be quoted as saying, what is this, Russia? Why are you forcing me to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I happen to have a homeroom teacher who was a veteran, and so he didn't like it, but at least he was a reasonable man. He pulled me aside. He said, listen, I can understand that you have moral objections. I don't want to, and I understand those moral objections. I don't want to infringe on your right not to participate. That would make me no better than the people I'm, dead set against, the people I fought wars against. He said, but I can't have you doing it in front of the whole class and basically inciting others to do it. So he asked me very politely, he said, would you mind, instead of sitting down in the middle of class while everybody else says the pledge, would you mind standing out in the hallway? And because he had approached me in such a reasonable manner, I said, sure, that's fine. I was a strong enough kid to be able to not care about what people were going to say about me. A lot of people aren't, unfortunately. And I said, you know what, you're being very nice, you're being very reasonable about this. I respect the fact that, you fought in wars, that this means a lot to you. I will stand out in the hallway, and that's what I ended up doing. But again, to imagine a school nurse sort of taking the other approach there and saying, I'm not going to treat your wounds or whatever because you refuse to say the pledge, and I have my rights to religious freedom. This is fucked up. It was in Pennsylvania, which kind of surprised me. I lived in Pennsylvania. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of redneck stuff going on in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, but you much more expect this type of thing to come out of Indiana or Texas or, a southern state, certainly a red state. I was a little surprised that it was Pennsylvania who ended up, but then again, Pennsylvania is the one, if you remember the story of the Dover, Pennsylvania school district that tried to introduce what they called intelligent design into the classroom, and then it was proven beyond any reasonable doubt that it was just a repackaging of creationism, and finally they got shut down. But, again, it's happening all over the country, and I think we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real problem. And, I would beg to differ with the nurse. I do not think that she reserves the right not to treat a student. She's in a very different set of circumstances than a floral shop, as it came up recently in the news. There's a reason church and state are separate. I don't think, I have nothing against Christianity, and I have nothing against atheism, but, there's a reason church and state are separate. We could go into that, an entire show.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think that there's
I'm sorry.
a real problem.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry, but the people who try to say that's not what the Founding Fathers intended, this, that, and the other thing, I could throw you a dozen quotes to prove you're wrong. They were all firm believers that our democracy, our state, could never survive if church was, if the churches were allowed to have any influence whatsoever in the laws. and
there's a reason the Pilgrims
came common
to
sense,
America,
even if it's not. It's reality, and I'm sorry, that Christians believe that they have the right to tell others how to behave and to discriminate and things like that, but all you're doing is proving the points of the other side,
Yeah, and it's the same with the atheists that try to drive, their points home through force and browbeating. And, I mean, the Pilgrims came here to escape religious persecution, so what makes anyone think that persecuting anyone's religious beliefs now would somehow benefit the population as a whole?
Well, now, but here's the thing, and let me ask you this, because I don't see it. I hear a lot of complaints about religious people being persecuted by atheists, and I'm not seeing it. Where is this? The idea that no, you don't get to put your nativity scene on a public in a public setting, that and I say public setting, I mean on public land, that you need to keep your religion at home, in church, and out of the state house. That stuff, to me, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. That's just enforcing the separation of church and state. Where do you see atheists actually persecuting the religious people? I mean, certainly they're, and I'm the first to admit that, I'm on this bandwagon as far as I'm not afraid to publicly speak out against what I find to be ridiculous beliefs and hateful beliefs in a lot of cases. But where do you see persecution? Because it's interesting. My next news story is going to touch on that as well. Where do you see the persecution coming from?
Okay, and I don't have anything to cite. I don't have anything pulled up, but there were recently not only atheist groups, but I know that there were some who were against prayer within the schools. Now, let me be clear. I do not agree with teacher-led prayer, because
right.
I think that is a public institution advocating Christianity, which, is a whole nother. Anyway, there are atheist groups saying that there should be no prayer whatsoever, even if the students want to lead prayer, that has no place within the school. And
I think if it's a led prayer, period, I have to agree. I think that it doesn't matter whether it's the students or the teachers leading it. You're then taking the people who aren't, who don't believe in prayer, who don't believe in religion and whatnot, and giving them, especially as children, a very tough choice to make. Do you go along with the crowd just so that people don't make fun of you or bully you or whatever else? Or do you stand your ground like I did in the instance of the Pledge of Allegiance? I don't think that we should be putting people into that type of situation. As an atheist and as somebody who, is quite in tune, I mean, I almost went into atheism almost as a profession, as an author and whatnot. I can say that the majority of atheists, that the vast majority of atheists I know, will say, listen, if you want to go, pray in school by yourself, you know what I mean? You want to close your eyes and talk to whatever imaginary friend you may have up there. That's all well and good. But the idea of, leading the prayer, whether it's the teacher leading the prayer, whether it's a coach leading a prayer, or whether it's a student leading the prayer, is just a recipe for ostracizing those who want nothing to do with prayer. And I think that, there's nothing that says that you can't pray silently anytime during the day, or if you want to pray out loud, go find a private place to pray. But the idea of allowing, whether it's students or teachers or anybody, to lead a prayer so that suddenly a spotlight is shined on anybody who doesn't participate, I don't think there's any room for that in public schools. I mean, that's me talking, and I think it's most atheists talking.
But even if it's at lunchtime, or if it's, in the mornings before class, I'm not talking about getting up in the class and joining hands and starting a prayer circle. But I mean, look at so I'm not saying this is persecution, but this is adversarial behavior. When you look at the atheist who put up the billboard in Times Square during Christmas, who needs Christ during Christmas? Nobody. I think that's a very adversarial move. You know what I mean? When you say that no atheists are persecuting, I think that's kind of I couldn't agree with you on that one.
Well, again, and yes, there is a lot of that going on, but the simple fact is atheists, I feel like, are stretching our legs because for the first time in over 1,500 years, we're allowed to actually say these things. We're allowed to actually speak our mind. And the reality is, is it adversarial to do things like that? Sure it is. And I think, there's definitely some people, myself probably included, who think that there should be some adversarial discussions going on about religion. But, is any harm coming to anybody from that sort of thing? I don't see it. I don't see any harm coming to anybody from putting up I've seen much worse billboards. Some of them I get a real kick out of. But the fact is, this idea that religious beliefs should be off limits to criticism, I don't subscribe to that theory at all. I think that, if anything, if you're going to base your whole world belief off of, scripture or something like that, that the very least that people who disagree with you, their duty is to openly criticize that and to, try to explain to you where they find faults with it. So, again, I don't know. I just don't see that as being – I don't see the idea of some billboards which can be certainly called adversarial, but that aren't causing any harm to anybody. I just don't see that as crossing anywhere near the lines of persecution. And, again, I'm certainly biased.
I think everything should be open to criticism. I do not disagree with you at all. Everything should be open to criticism. But I don't, like I said, I don't think that student-led prayer within the school is, I don't know, maybe it would exclude some people in certain situations at certain schools because, there are large majorities of Christians within many public schools, I'm sure. But I don't think and that, of course, is one of my issues. You don't get to pray because you're going to upset someone else, or you're going to make them feel excluded, or you're going to make them feel like they have to make a decision. I think that that's unfair. Now, if you talk about teachers leading prayers or the faculty, then I think we do have a problem.
Right, and don't get me wrong. If there was some, if some Christian group, especially if it was like an after-school thing, or if it was during, lunch period or whatever, there's some unused portion of the school and they want to go lead a little prayer or whatever else. I almost don't have a problem with that, but even still, again, in some of these schools, it's going to be very noticeable who doesn't participate. There's already enough things in this world to divide adults, let alone children. And one of my biggest problems with religion is it is a divider, and to let that kind of division go on in schools where we've already got issues with bullying, where we've already got issues with kids coming in, and shooting up the place. I just think I don't think it's asking too much to say, hey, pray all you want. I mean, pray in school. Just do it silently or do it, in some place where you're not bothering anybody. Do it personally. And then if you want to, have a group prayer session or whatever else, do that after school. Do that somewhere else. Do that, in a place where you're not, that isn't established by the tax dollars of people who may not be, in a lot of cases, may not be Christian. I just think that's, I think that's a certain right that we have to be able to expect. I think in a lot of the cases that atheists are being accused of persecuting, it's really just a defense. It's really just a matter of, hey, I've got a kid, I've got atheist children myself. I homeschool, but if they were in public school, especially a public school that happened to be predominantly Christian, I would not want them to have to deal with being one of the few kids who doesn't join in the prayer group or whatever else. I don't think that's fair to add that divider into school. There's already enough things to divide people. Let's just leave it as it is. But anyway, we're getting quite a bit off topic on a tangent here. So
fair enough.
Let's try to pull it back. And do you got any more stories for us on your end?
Yeah, I've got one more. I thought it was it's actually fitting with our topic. There was a problem with the publisher Random House in Germany, and the family of Joseph Goebbels, I'm not exactly sure how exactly it's pronounced, but those of you who may not know, he was Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. the family of Joseph Goebbels is suing Random House for royalties from a new biography. And this biography draws on diaries that were written by him, during his time serving in that role. The publisher's lawyer insists that no money should go to a war criminal. So, by default, his family, they're war criminals by default, I guess. But, it's in his name, so I can kind of understand. The lady, her name is Cordula Schacht, I believe. Her father was Hitler's Minister of Economics, and they're representing Joseph Goebbels' estate in the case against Random House. Random House had initially agreed to pay 1% of the net retail price to Goebbels' estate, but later they retracted. The lawyer for Random House Germany said, "We are convinced that no money should go to a war criminal. We are the first publishing house who has avoided others. Others have used this, basically, and they're the first one who have been sued. Right. They did offer to pay her if she would agree to donate the money to Holocaust charities, but she reportedly rejected the idea."
Right. That's very interesting too, because you got to wonder, at a certain point, isn't that visiting the sins of the father upon the children or whatnot? Was she accused of any war crimes?
And I think that's a valid point. He obviously was a horrible person, but how many of us out there have family members who are horrible people? And we shouldn't be judged by default. Right. So is she profiting off of war crimes? I don't know.
That's an interesting gray area, but of course, from the publisher's standpoint, they just don't want to pay, and it doesn't get much more clear cut than that. If you can find an excuse not to, you take it, because then you can put that profit on your bottom line and impress the shareholders, and you're having a good day. But
yeah, I think this argument would be a lot more valid if they were donating the entire proceeds from the biography to a Holocaust charity. But they're not,
at the very least, when she refused to donate her portion, that they said, okay, well, we're going to donate that portion for you. I think they would have a lot better time trying to sell that to the public if that's what they did. That's interesting. That's a very interesting one. All right, so we're running a little behind on time now. I'm going to go ahead and cut my this one story. I'm just going to mention real quickly. Jimmy Carter is no longer going to associate himself with the Southern Baptist Convention. He's kind of sick of a lot of their policies, especially what he feels are anti-women policies, or at least subjugation of women policies. So after 60 years, he is finding a different church, which, hey, go Jimmy, and I hope that you eventually realize that they all suck, and you should maybe get out of the church business in general. But the one story I did want to make sure I touched on too is, especially given the discussion we just had. So this comes to us from Salon.com, and the headline is "You're a 10-foot quote. You're a 10-foot tall crybaby." End quote. Bill O'Reilly destroyed by another Fox host over, quote, war on Christianity claims. Okay? And it's just kind of interesting. John Stossel is and Bill O'Reilly were having a discussion where Bill O'Reilly was talking, as he often does, about the war on Christianity and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to throw out there for folks a little bit of this back and forth, and then we'll head into a break. He says, after Stossel tells him, he says, you know what, Christians, not like Christians are being dragged out into the street and killed, he says, and Bill O'Reilly says, well, no, not yet, right? And Stoss was like, no, not ever. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. You're sensationalizing this. This is ridiculous. And so then O'Reilly comes back and says, well, we're being verbally killed, which is just a statement that you got to stand back in awe. Again, talking about propaganda, you really have to just say, verbally killed? Are you kidding me? And
you would argue that kill is probably one of the worst buzzwords, fear words.
Exactly.
Propaganda, leveraging
as
titles.
is war on whatever. We all know that that's a huge propaganda tactic. War on drugs, war on anything. And as George Carlin pointed out, you never see a war on poverty, a war on homelessness. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Stossel goes on. He said, this verbally killed things. He says, so what? He says, 83% of the country identifies as Christian. He said, if there's a war on Christianity, you already won. And Bill O'Reilly,
and
of course,
I love
not to be
Stossel,
outdone.
by the way.
What?
I love Stossel, by the way. I'm sorry, that guy is awesome.
Oh yeah. I mean, for a Fox News host, he's certainly enjoyable. I will definitely give him that. But anyways, O'Reilly, not to be outdone, he says it's not a matter of winning; it's a matter of respect. And he starts talking about all of the things he's done to help people out. As far as saying Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays and whatnot. And he railed against the secularists, saying that religion is bad because it stands. This is what he says: because they say it's bad because it stands in the way of unfettered abortion, gay marriage, and legalized marijuana. I mean, what? Fucking ridiculous. I mean, it's great that Stossel could put him on the ropes like that, to be so scrambling that I have to imagine even the majority of Christian listeners to Bill O'Reilly were stepping back and saying, okay, you're full of shit. You're totally full of shit, Oh, I really enjoyed that.
I mean, Bill O'Reilly was there during the Crusades, right? I mean...
Oh, yeah. The man, I mean, again, the man is... He's walking propaganda. That's our, and his closing, not his closing thing, but I will close with this. He was saying, don't call us bigots because we're opposed to gay marriage or because we want some limitations on abortion and don't want our tax money spent on it. Don't do that. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, if you're going to be a bigot, you're going to get called a bigot. And this is typical examples of propaganda where he starts talking about, we don't want our tax money, so we want some limitations on abortion, and we don't want our tax money spent on it. That's not what it's about. You're trying to prevent people who you have no right whatsoever to control their lives, to control what they do with their bodies, and trying to outright prevent them from having abortions. You're trying to discriminate against gays. You are a bigot. You believe...
I mean, that's... I don't think you can really mask his intent.
You believe the Bible gives you license to control how non-Christians behave. That's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, I just had a lot of fun with that one. I'm actually kind of glad I closed with that one instead and reordered things a little bit. Speaking of which, we're long past the point where we ought to be getting into a break. Since I am at the helm this week, I get to choose what we're doing for our break. So if I just search it out here, where the heck is it? We're going to go with a little music, and I won't bash country as I sometimes do, but I'm going to say it's not country music today. It's something a little different, something a little bit slower, and a little more my speed, I guess, the type of thing that I listen to relax. So some of you may have heard this before, some of you may not have, but sit back and enjoy, and we will be back in about 4.5 minutes.
You freaks stay tuned now, you hear? There'll be more Front Row with the Freak Show coming up right after this on blogtalkradio.com.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
I'll give you the correct demonstration. Cutie pie, pound those horse teeth.
Ooh. star. Wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops. High above the chimney top, that's where you find me. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dream that you dare to, oh why can't I? Oh, someday I wish upon a star. Wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drops. High above the chimney top, that's where you find me. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dream that you dare to, why, oh why can't I?
What'd you think of that one, Bax?
What is it?
That was Israel Kamakawiwo Ole, a very large native Hawaiian gentleman.
Conspiracy, maybe. Screwed, definitely. Hey, you're listening to the Front Row.
Sorry, didn't realize that somebody put in a little station ID at the end there.
No worries.
But yeah, Israel Kamakawiwo Ole, a very large native Hawaiian gentleman. Love his stuff. He's just, he oozes love out of every pore in his body. When I'm having a tough day, put on a little of that, and things just look brighter, We are, of course, in the second half of the show by now, well into the second half of the show by now. For those of you who would like to call in and chat with us, please do so. The number for that is 646-668-8756. Once again, that's 646-668-8756. We'd love to take your calls. In the meantime, Bax, I believe you had some stuff you wanted to talk to us about with a certain very famous propaganda campaign. Why don't you go ahead and take it away with that?
Yes, sir. I think we're going to talk about the medical marijuana movement. Did you want to play the Joe Rogan clip before I get started?
That's entirely up to you. Would you like me to?
Yeah, let's go ahead and knock that out.
All right, let's roll it. We will be back with Bax talking marijuana propaganda in under 3 minutes.
I thought the same thing. I didn't start smoking pot until about 5 years ago. I thought pot made you stupid. I bought into it just as much as anybody did. I realized when I was like 30 years old that I was tricked. I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. People say, well, you can abuse marijuana. Well, shit, you can abuse cheeseburgers, too. You don't go around closing Burger King because you can abuse something. I could take a fucking fork and jam it in my eyeballs. That mean forks should be illegal? I could jump off a bridge. Should we outlaw bridges? Let's nerf the world. Spokesmen for giant special interest groups, whether those special interest groups be law enforcement or whether they're private prisons or whether they're pharmaceutical companies or whether they're oil companies. We have spokesmen for gigantic corporations that are trying to calm us and get us to press the right button in the voting booth. It's real simple. You put your loafers on, you put your black socks on, you get in your car, you have your briefcase, you say hi to your neighbors, he mows his lawn just like you do, and things keep moving along in the same direction they always have been. That's why marijuana laws exist. If people do drugs and they commit crimes along those drugs, they should, in fact, be punished. But you can't punish someone for something that hurts no one. In 10,000 years of known use of marijuana, there's never been a single death attributed to marijuana. There's 400,000 deaths in America alone every year that are directly attributed to tobacco. How many people in this country alone are addicted to antidepressants? How many people who are on antidepressants really have imbalances, and how many of them just got off of a bad relationship and they're depressed? The people that have personality problems and the people that are going to be lazy and going to lose their job, they're going to lose their job anyway. They're not losing their job because of marijuana. That's just a lie. Great quote that life is a tragedy to those who feel and a comedy to those who think. And if you are a thinker and you look at the marijuana situation and you're not laughing, you're fucking dumb. It's a weird thing that you do when you make nature against the law. There's a movement in this country, and some people have more faith in it than I do. Maybe from hosting Fear Factor all those years, I've lost my faith in human beings and their intelligence.
When I published Marijuana Reconsidered, I, in the last chapter, predicted that once people understood these things about marijuana, the prohibition would be gone. It would be gone in 10 years. Carl Sagan, who was a very good friend of mine, read the manuscript and he said, "Lester, you're so pessimistic. 10 years?" Well, here we are, 45 years later, and nothing has happened. Nonetheless, it can't help but happen. I mean, you can't sustain a lie like that forever.
Okay, the guy at the end there was the guy who published Carl Sagan's book that he was talking about. And what I'm going to go over here, I'm not at this juncture going to talk about advocating marijuana for personal use or just legalization in general, but I want to talk about medical marijuana. Joe has a good point when it comes to the abuse of specific products as a reason for some to outlaw a product. I'm going to do a little monologue here to try to keep it as brief as possible. I believe that is an example of the common mentality that a specific group knows what is best for the majority. I came across an article in the Huffington Post I found interesting. Those who believe in the right of those to use medical marijuana struck a huge win this year with the passage of the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which showed one of the most powerful bipartisan pushes in recent history, with 170 Democrats and 49 Republicans coming together to shove this amendment through with the Cromnibus bill. A rare show in our current political climate, to be sure, not to mention a win for states' rights pushing back against government overreach, namely by the Department of Justice. The Rohrabacher-Farr provision states that, and I quote, "None of the funds made available in this act to the Department of Justice may be used with respect to the states of," and there's a list of 32 states, "to prevent such states from implementing their own state laws that authorize the use, distribution, possession, or cultivation of medical marijuana." Now, I don't want to get into a lengthy legal discussion, but I do want to point out that we are moving in a positive direction in some ways that can help people and take a stab against big pharma, big pharmaceutical industries. There is proof that marijuana does have real medical value. According to the Daily Caller, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the NIDA, issued a revised report in the month of April, and that's this year, stating recent animal studies have shown that marijuana can kill certain cancer cells and reduce the size of others. Evidence from one animal study suggests that extracts from the whole plant marijuana can shrink one of the most serious types of brain tumors. Research in mice shows that these extracts, when used with radiation, increase the cancer-killing effects of the radiation. Citing research published last year in the Molecular Cancer Therapy Journal. This brings up a confusing set of contradictions, as the government has classified marijuana as Schedule 1, which basically means that it has no medicinal value. So we have a government-backed research group who is extremely well-funded with research that proves benefits of medical marijuana, then another part of the government saying that it will prosecute those in possession of marijuana. Patrick Rodenbush of the DOJ saying that the amendment doesn't apply to cases against individuals or organizations, despite the aforementioned amendment passed by Congress. Congressman Rohrabacher has attacked this position, saying that the continuing prosecution of these cases represents a clear defiance of the will of the people as represented by the United States Congress. Good people, as a result, are victimized by their own government. She said this earlier this month. Now, the propaganda machine has worked towards instilling fear when it comes to marijuana since the creation of infamous films, as some of you may know, Reefer Madness, and claims that it causes people to rape or even kill children with their cars after purchasing fast food. While I could argue the point that it is in fact a gateway drug, there is legitimate proof through research and testimonials that it does help to heal and treat illnesses. I think it's worth looking at the amount of money put into keeping it illegal due to law enforcement, jobs, and profits, the staggering number of prisoners with minor possession charges, and the ramifications of the pharmaceutical industry when you can grow medicine rather than purchasing it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I think it's worth noting, too, folks, that that's also a little bit of a preview of some features we may have Bax doing for us in the future. So be sure to stay tuned in future episodes to hear more just like that. You know, it reminds me of some reading I did when I was not much older than my oldest son is right now, on the origins of the illegalization of marijuana, and a man by the name of Harry J. Anslinger, who he was the first head of the National Narcotics Commission, which later, of course, became the DEA. But when he was put into that position, it was shortly after the end of Prohibition. There really weren't any illegal drugs in the country, so this guy had to find an excuse to keep his job, and he had heard about this plant that, some Mexican migrant workers down by the border and a few people in jazz clubs were smoking. And with the help of George Hearst, I'm sorry, not George Hearst, the other Hearst, whose name's escaping me, and I won't bog down time with it. But anyways, the paper magnate, who didn't want hemp to replace paper replace his paper and become a cheaper source of paper, and who also happened to own all of the media outlets. The two of them went around basically doing scare campaigns saying that marijuana was making people kill each other and all of this other ridiculousness. And, of course, at the time, great propaganda. Congress had no way of knowing that this was all total bullshit fabricated by people who were looking to make money and keep their jobs and whatnot. So when he went to Congress and he said, hey, we need to outlaw this thing. It's terrible. It's making people kill each other and everything else. It was open and shut. They went ahead and outlawed it, and, many years later, rather than admitting their mistakes, they exported those same laws to every country in the world. I forget what the name of the Trade Act was, but basically the United States, which was the heaviest trader at the time, went around and said, hey, if you're not going to outlaw marijuana like we did, then we're not going to trade with you. And suddenly you have virtually every country in the world outlawing it along with the United States. So it is quite the story if you ever have time to look into the history of why marijuana is illegal both at home and in most places abroad. I highly recommend folks taking a look into that.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, you have a wealthy industrial tycoon who did not want his paper factories to be ran out of business. Yep. I mean, they had just come out with a machine that separated the hemp. I mean, am I wrong? The United States Constitution is printed on hemp, is it not?
I believe the original was, yes. And George Washington was quoted as saying, make the most of the hemp seed, sow it everywhere. In fact, Queen Victoria used to use marijuana medicinally, and it used to be an absolute staple in the medical bag of every physician in the country, and usually in the world. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have allowed propaganda to demonize something, and especially when we're a country that allows people to drink alcohol. If you do a comparison between the two, you would find that it's frankly ridiculous that you can go into a bar or a liquor store or whatever else and buy basically liquid poison. But if you want to, light a plant on fire and inhale some of the runoff, then you're a criminal. It's a Schedule I substance as far as the United States is concerned, and none of these state laws, whether it's Washington or Colorado or the relaxed medicinal laws that we see in places like California, none of that actually trumps the federal laws, and you'll often see stories of the feds coming in and busting dispensaries under the federal laws. this stuff needs to stop, and we need to stop persecuting our citizens, whether they're using it medicinally or whether they're just using it to get through a tough day. There's really nothing wrong with that. We need to be allowed to make our own choices, and I think that Joe Rogan clip was pretty dead on when he talked about it doesn't make you stupid, it doesn't make you kill anybody. It's just it's just something that some people use to relax and other people use as medicine, and it's a plant. It's not a demon.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of some pretty blatant propaganda. But let's kind of shift gears here and talk about some more subliminal propaganda. For example, one of the recent Batman films, there's a scene that involves a kidnapping of a foreign national, from their own country, and then, Batman and his, I can't remember Morgan Freeman's character, they tap into all the ordinary citizens' cell phones. And I think it's a direct allegory for wiretapping, extradition by illegal channels, and justification for these things because of a terrorist threat. The viewers led to believe that all these were necessary, albeit illegal, infringements on the rights of citizens for the greater good.
Right. You're absolutely right, and it's and another example of is of course, the American Sniper movie, and the idea that there's certainly plenty of people who are doing quite well on demonizing anybody who's either Islamic or looks Islamic, and a lot of these feature films that we see nowadays are helping with that type of propaganda, as well as a million other types of propaganda. It's everywhere you look. It's not just on the news. It's not just in the ads. It's in feature films. It's in the books we read. It's certainly all over the Internet. It's coming at you from every direction. I mean, I would say that if you sat down all day long, watching movies, reading books, going on the Internet, 90-some-odd% of what you're looking at has some sort of propaganda twist to it.
Absolutely. I mean, is it too far to stretch your imagination to believe that if Coca-Cola or Pepsi makes you more attractive, or Axe body spray will somehow magnetize females? Is it so hard to believe that being a Republican makes you a better American?
Right. Exactly.
There are subtle forms of this propaganda that people may not even realize they're being bombarded with.
Oh, yeah, exactly. In fact, that's a great segue into a few questions I have for you. So you're familiar, of course, with eggs and bacon, bacon and eggs being the all-American breakfast, right?
Yes, sir.
You've heard you've heard people describe that as almost in a patriotic sense, saying, bacon and eggs, that's a good American's breakfast, right?
Yeah, bacon and eggs, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, dog, cat. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, apple pie. But the bacon and eggs thing was significant. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions before I explain why.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you about Dixie cups, okay, the little Dixie cups, all right?
Uh-huh.
Now, do you believe that those are more sanitary than, say, reusing a washable cup?
I don't personally believe it, but I know when I was a kid, my grandmother had a little dispensary beside of the bathroom seat. You brush your teeth, grab the Dixie cup, wash your mouth out.
Yep.
So I believe
and that's the point. Many people do believe that that is a more sanitary thing than using a perfectly clean, reusable cup. Another one I got to throw out there is ivory soap. Okay, plenty of people out there believe that ivory soap, it may or may not be true that it's used in most hospitals. The idea that it's somehow medical grade compared to other soaps. And one more thing to throw out there. Now, do you use public water where you're at?
I actually have well water, but, if I did not have a well, I would use public water.
Okay. And is the public water in your area, do they put fluoride in it?
As far as I know, they do. I can't state that for a fact.
Right.
But I remember as a child, we would do fluoride rinses as part. The gym teacher would come in, everybody gets their Dixie cup full of fluoride, and you do your. They called it swish. We all did it for years.
Yep. And all of these things that I've just mentioned, from bacon and eggs being an all-American breakfast to Dixie cups being more sanitary than regular cups, to to fluoride in the water, to ivory soap being fluoride in public water systems, to ivory soap being medical grade as opposed to other soaps. We have one man to thank for all of these things. Can you guess what his name is?
I would have to say Mr. Bernays.
Yes, Edward Bernays. This is just a short sampling of the list of things that he has done to convince the American public to influence their behavior in one form or another. None of it's true, okay? Now, when I mentioned the fluoride in the water, he's the one who convinced us all that it was both safe and beneficial to human health, okay? Now, the American Dental Association, of course, jumped right on the bandwagon with that. But the reality is these are all, the only reason that happened was because Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, needed to find a market for a byproduct of their manufacturing that was called hexafluorosilicic acid, which is basically fluoride, okay? They didn't know what to do with it. They were producing this as a byproduct. It was often thought of as a chemical pollutant, since fluoride, of course, is poison, which is why you should always spit instead of swallowing your toothpaste. But again, he was approached by Alcoa. They said, "Hey, we need to find something to do with this basically fluoride substance that's a byproduct of our production." And he came up with the idea of convincing the world that it would be beneficial to put it in the water supplies, and suddenly there's a market for their byproducts. It's absolutely amazing. This guy actually wrote many, many books, one of which was called Propaganda. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud and a very big believer in the idea of psychological marketing. And again, the long list of things that most people in this world believe as far as products and other things go are directly attributed to him. And if not directly, a lot of them are people who learned from Edward Bernays how to do this sort of thing, how to convince people through all sorts of different ad campaigns and different propaganda campaigns where, again, we bypass those outer brain defenses and go right after the emotions to go ahead and buy this product or go ahead and support this thing. He actually was probably the most instrumental person in the overthrow of the government of Guatemala. The democratically elected president of Guatemala at the time was Colonel Jacobo Arbenz Guzman. Okay, well, he basically went out and said and convinced people that this guy was a communist, and there's enough anti-communist sentiment out there that they basically toppled that whole regime. And in fact, if you look into a lot of stuff about propaganda, some people will say that in fact, what was it, Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman, who came out with a book called Manufacturing Consent, the Political Economy of the Mass Media, and one of the 5 types of propaganda that they specifically named as being, again, the 5 main types of propaganda was anti-communist ideology. It's so effective to be able to call, you see it happening today with our president. The right-wingers are saying, oh, he's a communist, he's a socialist, just to try to turn public opinion against a Democrat president. It's absolutely bullshit,
Absolutely.
The wealth gap under Obama has gotten only worse. He's done nothing that would legitimately label him even socialist, let alone communist. And yet, every day on Fox, you will hear those words used to describe him. Why? Because these are those words that get around your outer brain, around your logical defenses, and end up hitting you right in the inner brain, right in the emotion centers. It's absolute insanity that that it's almost become this easy to influence public opinion.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We've become a culture submersed in media. And I hate to be trite and bring up the same old story, but people are more concerned with Kim Kardashian's ass than they are with our economy tanking. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, what is it going to take foreign troops on our soil for people to realize what's going on? Is it going to take our entire union of states to turn into what happened in Detroit for people to wake up? I mean, it's still a wasteland in Detroit, not to mention down in New Orleans and the 13th Ward. You know, there's places in both cities where the police will not go.
Yep. And I think, you know, it's interesting you bring up Detroit, because a lot of the propaganda that you'll see surrounding Detroit nowadays is the idea of blaming unions or blaming Democrats or whatever else, simply because the unions demanded the pensions that they had been promised, that their that these employers were supposed to have set aside for their workers, and the employers didn't do that. The reality is, it's the right wing. It's the hey, let's have no regulations on business group that caused this issue to happen. And as with anything else, I mean, it traces back to the idea of capitalism and this idea that profit before people has become the name of the game, not just here in America, but in most countries out there. There is no thought for the well-being of the public. There is no thought for the well-being of our environment. There is no thought whatsoever for anything besides making money, and specifically making money for not just the top 1%, but nowadays it's that top tenth of 1% who, if I remember the statistic I read the other day, have more wealth and property than the bottom 40%. You know, it's really getting out of hand. And I think you're absolutely right, Bax, to say, you know, what's it going to take, besides boots on the ground, to convince people to rise up in the streets and demand better systems, better systems of government, better systems of economics, equal treatment or reasonable treatment of workers. Where is the outrage? You know, everybody just seems to want to go along with their lives, doing their own thing, and I think, we got to take that back to propaganda. They've been told that, hard work will get you ahead. That's bullshit. That is total bullshit. If hard work would get you ahead, the rich people would keep it all for themselves. You know, if there was some value in hard work. The reality is, money makes money a lot faster than labor does, and it always will in a system. And
that's what we have to do. We have to continue this dialogue. We have to have. I'm willing to bet that most of the people out there listening are listening because there's a feeling within inside. A small voice is telling you that things are not right. Our world is wrong right now. And I pray that we don't get to the point where freedom is a choice. Freedom should be a state of being. It should just be what we are. We shouldn't have to choose to react against those who are trying to take away from us to be free.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's, again, we're being dulled down. We're being fed a bunch of bullshit just to keep us going to those jobs every day. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't want to work more than I have to, okay? But everybody wants to believe, oh, well, that makes you lazy and, you're going to be a welfare queen draining my tax dollars and everything else. Nobody even stops to talk about the fact that corporations aren't paying their taxes. It's just gotten out of control.
No, it has gotten out of control, and I think people don't realize that the reason that a lot of people aren't thinking about this and reading about this is because they're so tired. You work so much for so little that you don't have time to think.
Right.
You don't have time to research. But if we don't have this dialogue, it's not going to get any better.
You're right, and that's exactly how the system is designed, to make sure that people are just smart enough and informed enough to go do their job every day, but never have the time or the inclination to go research facts and find out why they're forced to go to work every day. Anyway, we're getting on our final 5 minutes, and I see that we have another familiar caller on the line. Let me go ahead and bring him in here. Hey, Crafty.
Fellas, how we doing?
Hey. All right, what are you calling to complain about? What I fuck up?
No, well, you know what? I have no idea. we'll find that out all tomorrow. But no, you know what? I just tuned in, I don't know, 5-10 minutes ago, and I was going to let it ride out. And I don't know if you guys have touched this, but with everything you'd been saying, it was just zinging through my head as another part of the propaganda, and another tool in the toolbox, and that is, and it's so important that people are, it kind of becomes it's almost like an accepted joke or whatever, but the recognition of it, and that is, the altering of the lexicon itself, right? Where torture becomes enhanced interrogation, right? We don't have wars anymore, right? We have political actions, or
presumption of hostilities.
Right, exactly, and
the changing of language.
I know you played,
right.
the George Carlin clip that you played.
I didn't actually get to play that. We didn't have
Oh,
the
you
time.
didn't play it? Okay. Well, regardless, he has another one, right, that he talks about, in World War I, it was shell-shocked, right?
Yes.
In World War II, it was something, and now it's come all the way down to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And so letting the powers that be get away with this language and not calling things what they are is vital to the awakening process, right? Because and that's more than anything what we become immune to. And Bax, you're right on when you say we're so tired of this and that, and then when you are that tired, overworked, underpaid, all that, and they're just telling you that some enhanced interrogation is going on, you're like, okay. A little extra interrogation, no problem there, right? Whereas
you're absolutely right.
What
I mean, it's you remember when terrorist used to specifically mean somebody it was a hijacker who would take hostages, things like that, not just necessarily some environmental activist that blew up an oil pump somewhere where nobody was around,
Right.
Yeah,
right.
It's called domestic terrorism.
Right. It works on both sides of the fence, right? Because now the stuff that could and should be softened is hardened, and the stuff that obviously is that should be put down as it should be is softened and spun and everything else. So but
my language has been hijacked.
Yeah, it's a huge aspect to it. As we're being assaulted with all this media, it's to pick up on. It's like, no, when you hear Dick Cheney say enhanced interrogation, it's like, Dick, you wouldn't last, 30 seconds in one of those rooms, of enhanced interrogation, and he talks about it like it's like a walk in the park.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
absolutely.
I thought I would I just felt the need to chime in on that, and that's about it really. So, interesting show notes though, to point out to both of you guys here, I guess in the final minute. Well, actually, you wrap it up. Take it away. We'll talk about show stuff later, and I'll sign off and let you carry out the show.
Sounds good, brother. And in the final few seconds here, I just wanted to remind everybody, or point out to everybody that the best defense against propaganda is critical thought. Critical thought means something. It means assuming that what you're told is not true, and making that presumption and going and double checking it, and seeing if there is any evidence to support that presumption. Try that out sometime. See how it goes. I'm Adamizer. Bax has joined me tonight. Crafty called in. And you know what? We've been great to have you. It's been great to have you all here, and it's been great to be in the driver's seat. And I hope you all have a great night, great week, and peace.